Hey, I'm Clayton Olson,
And I am John Patrick Morgan.
and today we are going to be talking about relationships. And in particular, this video, this dialogue that we're going to be engaging in is going to be speaking to those of you who are either married or you're in a relationship right now, and perhaps you're running into a tough time. Maybe you're struggling, perhaps you feel trapped, maybe you're wondering around whether you should leave your relationship. Maybe you're on the precipice of a breakup or divorce. Our aim is to help build a little bit more expansiveness into how you are showing up in this situation so that you can see things more clearly and perhaps start to show up in a way that will make a difference in your
Mm,
loving connection.
yeah. I was just sharing earlier with a girl on my team, Heather, about like the two things that I love more than anything to help people with are making money and healing relationship. And
Mm,
it's just my core wounds, right? As a kid, I was little. I didn't feel like I had power. I saw money as power. So that became like a thing to grow in my ability with. And my parents divorcing. We had like mom and dad and my sister, and we had just like the vision of the typical American family. And then their
mm,
divorce really hurt and really impacted me. And so from those wounds has grown like just a purpose for
mm.
helping people to create in those forms. And so I'm excited to talk with you, man. You're one of the people that have the deepest wisdom around relationship. We can jam on ideas that some people are like, what are you guys talking about? So hopefully we're communicating effectively today. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love people seeing a possibility for their relationship that was invisible to them and then having a sense of hope and then bringing a new attitude to it because that's consequential. Just that belief, that hope and belief is really a big part of what heals any issues that are going on.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you too, JP, because for the years that I've known you, you are a pretty revolutionary thinker and philosopher. And just some of the insights that you've popped in my own life around relationship, massive difference. And so I'm excited for my audience to get introduced to your creating perspective and just who you are
Cool.
as a person, man. Just a loving, powerful husband, father. So,
Yes. Thank you,
yeah.
man. Thank you. Feelings mutual. So let's jam. Went back and forth on some of the ideas I'll just highlight some of the ones, or I'll just pick one of the ones that I was most excited to talk about. And this idea that like it only takes one person to change a relationship.
Mm,
I've got a woman right now who wants to refer me like a couple, and I'm not even sure that both people in that relationship want to talk to me. Never mind, do they both want to be in the relationship?
mhm,
I'm like, I'll talk to both of them, but I actually only need to talk to one of them.
mm,
As long as they both want to be in the relationship, I only need to talk to one because it only
mm.
takes one person to change. And that's a really like it's a radical idea. It's not my idea. Byron Katie is where I got that idea from, but it's just I found it to be true over and over again. But what do you
Mm.
think about that before I
Yeah.
flesh out my take on it? What have you seen?
Yeah, I can relate. I've been in this for 12 years working with people, and I have uh, not done a lot of couples coaching. In fact,
Mm,
I have noticed that, look, I know there's really good couples coaches out there that are amazing at what they do. And I've also found a lot of people that come to me, perhaps they've been in couples coaching and it just hasn't been effective because the
mm,
person they're working with is just refereeing a surface level dynamic and they're not really
mm,
getting anywhere. And
mhm,
I believe, as just to say it in a bit of a different way than what you're saying, is that when one person shifts in a relationship, the entire geometry of the relationship tilts and moves in a different direction. So if one person's changing the way they're listening and the way they're speaking to another person, it has no, there's no choice but the actual dynamic to shift as well with that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
for
it
you,
does.
yeah,
I
what
mean,
do you,
yeah.
I'm curious how you see it as
Yeah, I
like,
don't use the
how is
word
that
geometry,
possible?
but I really like it. I really
Yeah.
like the word geometry, but because it's like the whole system changes. I use this word system a lot, but I think the reason that the relationship shifts when one person shifts is because I experience a relationship as something that exists between me and the idea I have of another person.
Hmm.
And then the other body out there that I might give the name, like my wife,
Yeah.
is experiencing like a state of being
Mm.
that's in relationship to my imagined version of her.
Yeah.
And so if I see a woman who is kind, loving, and supportive, and I be in relationship with that woman, then I'm vibrating at a resonance of love and care. And then
Hmm.
that body out there that I call Kalpna, that's my wife's name,
Hmm.
that body receives that vibration. And
Mm.
the connection is a function of the vibration, not a function of
Mm.
anything else. And so as long as I'm in the relationship with an idea of a person that is beautiful, then I'm going to be vibrating in that beautiful way. And that's going to be creating that connection that's beauty. And so like for me, a lot of the power in relationships comes from detaching the person that we hold in our mind from the person out there, and seeing that person that we hold in our mind as actually the deeper piece, the deeper cut is like a part of ourselves, an expression of ourselves, a projection of ourselves. I think it would probably be good to get into some examples of that. Otherwise it can get a bit conceptual, but
I can name what I hear you saying too.
Yeah. Put some words to it first before I give my example. What do you see?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that what we're actually in relationship with in any relationship is not actually with something outside of us. We're in relationship with a constellation of beliefs and stories that we think are true about that other person. And so we're really relating to that story, and that other person out there didn't necessarily create that story, that interpretation. We did through a whole host of things, from our past to the different ways that we're interpreting somebody's actions, how open our heart is informs that story. And so we're in relationship with that. And what I hear you saying then is that we ultimately have agency in shifting that story, which then, I love that word vibration, actually begins to perhaps change the other person or change the dynamic we have with that other person.
Yes. So yes, like spot on. Let me give some examples in my life. I'll give a kind of like seemingly surface level one that was like just an annoyance. Everybody who's in a relationship has annoyances about their partner. And the annoyance is not what the partner is doing. My suggestion is that the annoyance is the idea about what they're doing that you have. So for me, an annoyance was my wife, every time the toilet paper finished, she would leave the empty roll, like the brown tube, on the toilet paper holder and get a new toilet paper out and put it on top of the toilet, use some of it, and then just leave it there. And so
it's a red
like,
flag.
Who cares? Yeah,
I don't know if anybody told me.
I shouldn't have. Yeah, if I saw that, if only I had gone in the bathroom before we got married. No, it's just one of those things. It was like, it's nothing, but because it's so frequent, it's like I am the only guy in this house that can put the toilet paper tube in the bin and put this thing on, like that 2.5 seconds of labor.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it didn't annoy me that much. I was just like, why don't you do that? And she's like, oh, I don't know. Sorry, I will. And then she didn't. And then it started to annoy me because we had this, oh yeah, I'll do it. But then she didn't do it. And I'll do it. And then I kept bringing it up. And so it was like one of those things like every relationship has where it's actually not a big deal, but it becomes a big deal for you. And so I was being annoyed by it. But then I talked to my brother-in-law and he was pointing out how his wife does that, my wife's sister. They both do it. And then when I investigated a bit more, I found out it was because in their home where they grew up, even into their 20s, their dad was the only one that did that. We're going to have a generation of like people. What are you going to teach our boys? Are just going to be down the whole line. We got people not putting the toilet paper roll. It's just like, just leave it to somebody else. I saw that. And then suddenly one day, I can't remember how I got there, but I realized that right when we got married, there was a very tragic accident and her dad died. And that part of the reason she's leaving that there is because she misses her father. And I could make up some things about, oh, you're projecting your dad's stuff onto me. That could be ugly or it could be beautiful. And suddenly the script flipped and I saw it as an opportunity to be a little bit of something that she lost that was really important to her. And now every time I see that toilet paper tube, I am overcome with love and gratitude for her in my life. And I take pleasure in the fact that she left it for me and that I can be a little bit of that for her. And so my relationship transformed. She didn't do anything. She stopped being lambasted about it from me, but I stopped being annoyed and now I'm touched. So that's like on a surface, a small thing, but it does demonstrate the structure we're talking about, the relationship. There's a little bit less whining and complaining in our relationship now because of that shift in me. And no change in her behavior at all.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, first of all, super touching, really touching.
Thank you.
Just to access that level of depth of her relationship with her father just through the toilet paper roll, right? And how that suddenly unlocks this outpouring of love towards your wife. And I think it's a microcosm for how we can be in relationship and it's just something as small as that can end up leading to a death of a relationship by 1,000 paper cuts, where
100%.
all these annoyances are all these
They
different
just
ways in which
stack.
we want our partner to change, and all the ways in which we think we start judging them as unconscious, or we start extrapolating, okay, well, because she left the toilet paper roll that way, what does that mean about her? Oh, this is another expression of how she doesn't
Yeah,
finish
yeah, yeah.
things, right? And
I was doing that, man. She's not
yeah,
responsible. I could find something else that she doesn't do.
and then that starts to create
100%.
this story where now you're looking for that. You're looking for other
Right.
ways in which she's not responsible, other ways in which she's not finishing what she started. And
Mm.
then, this is a concept that I talk about too, which is, evidence is infinite in every
Mhm.
direction. And so if
Mhm.
evidence is infinite in
Right.
every direction, it means that anything you're looking for, you're going to find it.
More and more of it. Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, what we're looking for isn't always what we want. And
Mhm.
so how do we start looking for what we want versus looking for the things that annoy us? And
Yeah.
I think that's a great example of that.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you another one just because I think this is such an important point. The more people can get this, the better.
Mm.
This is a deeper one. Like for me, when my wife doesn't respond when I speak, I'm like, my trigger goes off, right? Like if I say something and she doesn't acknowledge me, I'm like, "Fuck." And that's just from my childhood. Like when my dad spoke, I had to respond. It was just like, you have to acknowledge all speaking, very military kind of style. My dad was a cop. His dad was a World War II Navy gunman. So it's like everything was like that. And so I've got that pattern in me. That's the way that you show love, is that you acknowledge and respond instantly. And so I had a really hard time with her not responding, especially if I was upset about something. And that was just like, to me, that was like personality level issue. That was like really challenging. It was deeper than the toilet paper thing.
Yeah.
That was, I certainly had existential thoughts about it, about that difference. And one day her mom was staying with us after our first son was born. Got 2 boys now, 4 and 8, but this was like 8 years ago. And my wife was upstairs and she just called downstairs, "Mom, can you turn up the air conditioner?" And her mom didn't say anything and she didn't move. I was just watching. If she had asked me, I'd have been like, "Yep, got it." And I would have gone and done it. Mom didn't say anything, didn't move. And then after about 30 seconds, she just got up silently, walked over to the air conditioner, adjusted it, and went back and sat back down. Never said a thing. And I'm like, fuck. That's just how they do it.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not. And I started to see, wow, all this time, what does it mean when I need somebody to acknowledge? What is that really about? And so it started to unravel.
Yeah.
And I started to look at like, wow, the idea that you must respond. I didn't have this awareness back then. That's because of the way that I grew up and people have to respond. I just had the idea that when you speak and the person responds, that's the right way to do life. That's all I could see. Then I saw a different way. I was like, wow, their family works okay. And they don't have that rule about life. And so I loosened my grip on that, and it still get triggered from time to time, but I got a place to go with it now that I didn't have before. And so then the relationship shifts because I'm not pressuring her like I used to respond and acknowledge as much. I'm not free of that completely because it's a big one, but, and so then I'm easier with her. And then the dynamic is easier. The vibration is better. And guess what she does more often? Because she knows I like it. She responds and acknowledges, which was going further away when I needed it.
Yeah.
When I'm saying you're wrong for not acknowledging, guess what she does less of? Acknowledging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So something I want to underline there, because it's so universal. And I think anybody watching, just there's a beautiful concept here, which is you stopped creating resistance around something that she was doing and instead turned towards it with love. And then her being able to give you what you want came from a place of desire on her part, rather than you getting angry at her and then her having to change out of obligation. Right. Hey, you need to respond to me because when you don't love me. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to respond to you. Otherwise you don't feel loved. And I feel like I'm being forced to do so, versus you understanding the deeper tapestry of what's actually happening, accepting it, experiencing openness around it, and then her willingly coming forward to meet you in the way that you want to be met. And then another piece that I'm hearing too, man, is the second agreement in the 4 agreements, which is you're doing the work to not take things personally, right? Because at first when it happens, it's, oh, wow, this is about me. This is possibly about my lovability. You release that, you look deeper, you see the wider spectrum of what's happening, and you realize, well, this has nothing to do with me. This is just something I'm witnessing that possibly has been in the family for maybe generations of ways
Yeah.
of minute ways of responding to other family members.
Right. Yep. What about you in Asia? Can you think of a time where you've shifted something and it's shifted the relationship and she didn't even know or have to be involved?
Oh man. I mean, I, yeah, I think there's times I tend to be a just executor in terms of
Hmm.
getting things done, scheduling, taking care of myself, being responsive. And I think the shadow side of it is I have to watch out for burnout. I have to watch out where
Hmm.
I start to do more than I just be. And when I'm in that place of executing, I can oftentimes look at people that maybe are not doing as much as me, and I judge them as lazy.
Yeah.
I judge
I
them
can
as,
relate. That's why I'm laughing. Yeah.
yeah, like it's okay. You're not as driven as I am, or there's a way in which like you're okay, that at its worst, it's you're okay with mediocrity or something, right?
Mm. Mm.
And I think what I've realized through being with Asia is all the ways in which I'm really hard on myself. And I kind of have over the years forced myself into being that way. And she's helped me really
Hmm.
soften and realize that maybe I am enough and I'm doing enough, which is wild. She's
Hmm.
really helped me with that. And in that,
Hmm.
the laziness that I had maybe in my worst moments judged her for, then transform into her taking care of herself and her really making sure that she's moving from a place of
Mm.
inspiration in her heart versus
Hmm.
duty and force. And so
Hmm.
I there's a way in which I think, I have not given myself a lot of permission in my younger years to move from my heart and to move from inspiration, but
Hmm.
rather to move from commitment and force and execution. And so
Hmm.
through her way of being, I've learned that I would judge it because I never felt like I had permission to be that way, right?
Mm.
Because that wasn't lovable for me.
Hmm.
That was
Mm.
I would judge that aspect of me. And so through watching her, I think I've been able to actually reclaim more of those aspects of me that I've disowned. I have more capacity now to relax. And ironically, in doing that and releasing the judgment and the resistance to her, I noticed that she steps up and in many ways is more committed and takes more action than I do in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe she already was. Maybe it's not like she changed necessarily.
Right.
Sometimes people
Yeah.
change, but a lot of times it's just the fact that you were blinded. You couldn't see the evidence of it
Yeah.
because you were looking for different evidence, like you were saying before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. I had a big
that's
judgment there
awesome.
that was creating a block to me seeing the
Hmm.
person in a totality.
Yeah, it's about the function of of a committed relationship as a
Mhm.
constraint. That's what I was hearing in your share about this commitment that you've made to be with Asia forces you to wake up to a capacity within yourself to just be instead of push and execute.
Mhm.
It's almost like it's like a force multiplier for individuation, or it can be
Mm.
if you're open to it. I have a
Mm.
friend that recently got married for the third time after not being married for over 20 years. So the first two marriages were shorter, younger. And it's just not for me. I've been just had a girlfriend for a long time, wonderful woman and in love, and finally got the courage to do it. And I was just sharing some of my, not necessarily solicited advice, but some just perspective on marriage. And I said that for me, getting married is about dying
Mhm.
in, in the sense of who I am, like
Mm.
as an individual is going to die when I get married.
Mm.
For me, that's the intent,
Mm.
is to like literally adopt an identity of an us, the single entity of us.
Mm.
And so what does that mean? It doesn't mean like that I get really comfortable being in partnership. No, it means that like what I value, what I
Mhm.
care about, what's important to me, what I use this body in service of is not for me or for her, but for something emergent from both of us letting go of that sense of self and becoming part of a union. Before I was married, I used to think like, oh, let me just check with my wife. It's fucking for
Mhm.
everything, man.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it's like if I'm gonna take my right hand to the zoo, my left hand's fucking coming, so I'm gonna ask it what it thinks. It's
Mhm.
that connected.
Mhm.
It's that part. It's like when you are one body, it's like that. And so for me, when I'm listening to you talk about like how you woke up to your own growth potential, I'm seeing that as something that only happens when you have a commitment to stay in a relationship with a person,
Mhm.
and when you see that relationship as an access point to a greater way of being that you can't even identify with and your current identity resists.
Yeah.
you have to be willing to die in the idea of who you are and what matters to you.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That hits so hard. And I know that when I was getting deeper with Asia, I went through my own death process with her. And so much of my ego had to die. My own individual wants had to transform into something bigger. And it took it was really humbling. I think it was very humbling experience, because this thing you're talking to, it almost seems like it could be put into the same camp as codependence. Well, wait a second. Oh shit. JP, are you losing yourself? Are you losing yourself in your marriage? Are you just compromising who you are? Are you having to ask your wife for permission? But you're not talking to that. You're not talking at that level. You're talking about aligning to a principle and to something that when the two of you get together, you give birth to, that's higher than both of you, right? A vision that you're willing to fight for, where you're no longer fighting for yourself as an individual. You're fighting against your partner, but fighting for something. And I think you can do that really fiercely when you know what that is, when you have that vision.
Wonder if you need a vision, or if you just need a willingness to surrender the identity of self to the possibility of something greater without even seeing what it is. Because sometimes I have vision, but sometimes I just have the principle that whatever is going to emerge between the two of us is going to be better than this idea that I have for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it reminds me of this statement that a relationship is a continual act of letting go of control.
Yeah.
Right. It's like jumping into a river, and rather than fighting the current or trying to swim to the bank so you don't drown, you let go, and you trust yourself to be guided, and you stay present, right? You're not just falling asleep at the wheel. You stay present and you stay above the water so you're not drowning, but it's like letting the strength of the relationship, that thing that lives between the two of you, guide you, versus you trying to hold on to keep it alive. And this is a piece that I wanted to say, is that I think when a lot of people get into this place of a relationship breakpoint, something is about to dissolve, something's about to transform, they clutch on tightly to the previous version of it.
Yeah.
Right? We can't let this change. I got to save it, or I've got to convince this person of something, or I need to stop them from doing this, and I really need to just get space from them. And I think what you're talking to, this like dying to the relationship, many people, when they don't get that, because it's a very deep concept to get. I think a break point you'll hit where a lot of people dissolve and break up and maybe start over with somebody new. But what I think the invitation here is that you're talking about is it's actually time to surrender and let yourself die to what's wanting to come through in the relationship. That's a higher level of relating.
Yes.
Yeah, how does that land
who
with
I
you?
am.
Yeah.
No, it totally lands. And I like this distinction. I think it's really important to distinguish this, what I would call interdependence, from codependence.
Yeah.
Because it is different, but it can look similar, and so it can look same. I am surrendering my idea of who I am and everything that I think matters to me. That's like my identity and my values. I'm surrendering that to something greater, to the relationship. And that's you could be married 30 years and that could scare the shit out of you. Because you can be married on paper and live together and not be willing to fucking surrender who you believe that you are and what your values are to your relationship. And that does sound like that's dangerously codependent. And I think it could be codependence if you haven't at least cultivated enough independence to be able to
have something to surrender.
Stand on your own 2 feet. Yeah. Have something to surrender. Have something to surrender.
Yeah.
And also to have the courage to not be dependent. Right? All those things. If you don't have those, then it could be a slippery slope. I'm just going to surrender to the relationship. So whatever you want, babe, I don't care. No, that's shrinking into codependence. It's not that. Because the way that I would distinguish it is I am unwilling to, if I'm going to do that, when I'm being in this way, a state of being, and I'm surrendering who I am and my values, I'm unwilling for her to not be. I'm a really fucking powerful stand that like, you got to do this too. You have to surrender your values and your identity to this higher thing. I'm not surrendering mine to yours. That would be, that's codependence.
Right.
And I can feel the difference.
Yep.
And you can feel it in a conversation when you're surrendering to somebody else versus surrendering, and you're both surrendering to something greater.
Yeah.
You know,
surrendering
on a practical
from fear
level
versus surrendering from love. That's what I'm hearing. That
absolutely
fear of, I'm going to surrender everything because I'm afraid of losing you, versus I'm surrendering because of the possibility of what we could create together
through love. Yep.
Yeah.
And on a practical example of that, like one way it plays out, not necessarily in a deep way, but in a practical way, is like when we create a vision for our life. Like there was where she wanted to live, and there's where it was I wanted to live. And we could try to create some economic balance between that, have a house in both places, live there for a while, then the other place.
Yeah.
But like the emergent one was, okay, let's both let go of that. And let's dream from our shared set of values, something third, something new, something different. And that's how we've ended up where we've ended up. We moved from London to Santa Monica for 7 years. And during the pandemic, we moved here to Maui.
Yeah.
And neither of these places are places that either of us would have gone on our own. We said, like, when we're getting married, we're going to both give up all of our dreams that we had for our life. Fuck, they're gone. Clean slate, new dream together. And if she died, I'm fucking out. I'll do something else.
Yeah.
This is the emergent, this is the dream of that third body, as Robert Bly calls it. It's not the dream of either of us. And so we're living surrendered to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. Living up in the mountains, I would never be here single. And she would be there.
Yeah, that's also part of it, right?
Yeah, it's
like exactly.
This is just not the place that we would be as individuals, but we would be here together because it is something that is
very romantic.
Perfect. Yeah, it's romantic, and it's a container for our relationship. Question for you. So, there's a thought that, hey, you need to compromise in relationship. You need to be willing to compromise. Yes. Okay. So for anybody that's saying, hey, look, compromise is part of this. Love is having to compromise sometimes. Why do you say fuck that? Because what are you speaking to about this that says?
Yeah, because compromise is compromise is an expression of the illusion of zero sum dynamics. So any zero sum game is the idea that in order for one person to win, another person has to lose.
Yeah.
And that idea is predicated on the illusion that we are separate. And so I used it as an example yesterday when I said this. That'd be like if zero sum games are real, then my right hand could take from my left. But it can't because it's one body. And so when I see the relationship in that way, like compromise means that a part of the body is saying no to what's possible for itself. It'd be like, let's go swimming. My left hand's like, it's like only like a part of the body goes swimming or something. It's like, just keep one hand out of the water all the time. It just doesn't make sense. The body can go swimming. And so if I'm saying I need to compromise for us to have what we want, then that means she also needs to compromise at times. And then what we create is the expression of compromise.
Yeah.
And I said, fuck that. Like part of my whole attitude towards life is you can have it all. You can have everything that you want and more. And so we both need to be an expression of that. So if we both come from a place that neither of us are going to compromise, then the transcendent possibility, the third body, the emergent result of what we create will be greater than either of our individual ideas. It will serve both of the things that we wanted and more. And I think that you have to stand in that possibility in order for that to happen. That's how all amazing creation happens, is people being unwilling to compromise and being committed to the outcome. It's the idea that there has to be trade-offs, that a relationship is about a balanced economy. That idea creates that very workable, polarity, like deficient relationship that just drags on and on. Yeah, there's no fucking life in it, but it works on paper. Yeah, right. Transactional, yeah. So it's like I've got some passion and I have no patience for a relationship that's dead, that's working and dead.
Yeah, right. Right.
And it starts with the lie of compromise, I believe.
It's so, what you're talking about is so fucking important, man, because I do a lot of individual work with people who are single, trying to get into a relationship. Rarely it is that when we really dive into it, it's rare that there's no good people out there.
It's rare that they think that, or it's rare that's the case, or?
Yeah, it's rare that there's no good people out there, but oftentimes this thing that we're about to talk about with the compromise, it's masquerading as, oh, there's no good people out there, I'm really picky. I don't want to get into a relationship where I'm trapped. I don't want to get into a relationship, we get even deeper, where I lose myself, where suddenly the freedom that I have right now gets taken from me, because underneath that, the belief about what relationship is that relationship is a compromise. Relationship is a trap. Relationship is where I have to give up possibly some of the best parts of me in order to maintain it. And I have to settle in some ways. And I think what we're naming here is that when you can begin to truly see relationship in the way that you're talking about, then getting into relationship becomes really freaking exciting. Because what becomes possible with two people, it's not the sum of the parts, right? It's greater than that. And
much
so
greater,
this is the deeper work is, if you're having a hard time in relationship or getting into relationship, start to examine what is it that you think relationship is that has it feel so elusive to you. Because most likely there's a belief underneath there that is protecting you from going all in, because you're not in contact with this truly awe-inspiring potential of what you can create together.
Yeah. Captivated by that possibility. Yeah.
Something to that point too, I'll name is like, I talk about, rather than making a compromise with somebody or compromise with yourself, you're actually making an adjustment. So when your partner wants something and say you think otherwise, a compromise is, okay, well, I'm going to give into this thing and then I'm going to kind of keep score of it. And with that compromise, I'm also opening up this hotbed of resentment that could be created.
Yeah.
Because if I keep doing that, it's not sustainable. And making an adjustment for someone or for the relationship is where, rather than leaving yourself behind or doing something because you're compromising, you're bringing your heart aligned into the action of creating that thing. So for instance, I'll give you an example of this. When Asia, my wife, moved into my house, she made this demand. It came out in the form of a demand. And it was, hey, like you need to clean up
your version.
Yeah, that's how I felt. That's how I took it.
Right.
That's how I interpreted it. It felt like I felt disrespected. It was essentially that I needed to clean out my basement so that there was more room for her to put her stuff down there. But logically, in my mind, I was like, well, you don't have enough stuff to fill up my basement, so I'm not going to go do this unnecessary work. And she would not let it go. And she had judgments around it, saying something to the effect of, your basement is filled with some of your friend's junk that just goes to die, and you need to get it out of the house. And the way that she was approaching it, it had me, I had this resistance to it, and I wanted to fight with her on a logical level. And I felt I was under the belief that, well, if I give this inch, she's essentially going to take a mile.
She can take a mile.
She's going to take a mile.
You show her how to be a wife, Clayton.
Yeah. Next thing you know, the whole house is painted a different color.
It's purple.
Taken out. Right. Yeah. And I'm just this like domesticated small man living
You live in the
house.
Basement. You're not allowed to leave the basement.
Exactly.
At that point.
So that was the fear that was stopping me to this transcendent reality that you're talking about. And so I stepped back from that, and I started to really just think about the invitation that she was offering me through that demand. And what it essentially was, that invitation was, it wasn't a selfish invitation on her part. What she was actually in connection with was, there's an energetic in this house, and there's a stifling energy down in the basement. By you clearing this up, it's actually going to change, and it's going to be symbolic for the new foundation we're laying in our relationship. And when I got that, which was truly what she was communicating with me when we debriefed later too, was by me clearing out the basement, it wasn't something I was necessarily just doing for her, but it was something that I was doing for the relationship. And so I cleaned the basement out, and I enjoyed doing it because I realized that it's like I got off of it. I got off of this defense that I was in. And by doing it, there was no compromise there. It was an adjustment I made, but it was with my heart, and it was with alignment with what we were ultimately creating.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have another example of the experience of this isn't compromise. That is the biggest experience of this was from having kids. And before I had kids, I was thinking like, oh man, you're going to have to make compromises because there's stuff that I really love to do and I'm not going to have the time to do it. And then when I had my kids, and like they started taking food from my plate, it really jumped out at me because I'm not the guy that you want to take food from his plate typically, right? This is my food. Even my wife, like I want to share, but you don't just take a fucking fry. You ask and I'll give you one. But like, it's an animalistic primal thing. Like, don't touch my food. Almost like I'm like eat with an arm in front of it or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, but my point is that when my kids take food from my plate, there's no feeling like that. It's not like I'm trying to have that be okay. And the most sense I can make of it is because I feel like my body is still eating because they are an extension of me. Like if they eat, I eat. If I eat nothing and they eat, I eat. And so in that same thing, it's like, oh, am I going to go out with my friends or am I going to play with my kids? It's like, it's not a fucking struggle. There's no compromise. I don't feel like if I end up doing something with my kids I don't feel like I'm compromising my social life. Or if I do go out and leave my kids home, I don't feel like I'm compromising them. It's just, they are me, I am them. And so with my wife, it's not as automatic, but when I rise to the way of being with my wife, where I share the food on my plate as if she's my kid, it sounds a bit like weird, but if I relate to my wife as if she's my children in that way, like the surrender to the something greater, it's the same kind of feeling. There's not a compromise when we give something to our kids. It's not like we're giving up. We're giving to another part of us, an extension of us. And for me, what we're talking about is it's not compromise because we're surrendering to we're surrendering to the extended body that we call the relationship. Yeah. So for anybody that has kids, I'm sure you can relate to that. And what if you think about your relationship that way? You can think about like, wow, what if I saw my relationship with my partner where everything that I gave wasn't me giving up something, but it was me giving to the extended aspect of me. Yeah. Like I do with my kids. Yeah.
For anybody that's listening right now who might be hearing us and saying, that sounds great. And I imagine that you need a willing and able participant who is who's wanting to live in that same frame, who is open to those types of ideas and knows this. But for me, I'm in relationship with somebody who is taking from me, who if I give too much, then I am just going to feel resentful, or they're not playing the same game as me. Where do I even start? And this is the reason I'm in trouble, is because I'm waking up to maybe their selfishness or their demands. And, maybe the red alert sign is flashing. Like, what would you say to somebody that is in that perspective if they're hearing this and this sounds unrealistic, or it sounds like it's a great idea, but you also need to pick the right person for that? Where would they start to maybe adopt something?
I think they need to start with saying no. Like the freedom to be a yes to something greater starts with the willingness to say no. Nietzsche does, the camel, the lion, and the child as like the stages of evolution of the psyche of the will. And the camel is the one that's willing to say, okay, I'll do the work. I'll carry the load. Other than the herd, the sheep do nothing. And then the camel carries a load. It goes out and achieves. It does what society tells it to do. And then there's a certain point that the camel becomes a lion. And the lion says, no, society, I'm not doing it your way. I'm doing it my way. And then the lion's doing it their way. And then ultimately there's an end to the value of my way, which is that independence. And you realize that there's something, I'm not in the dance. I'm too alone. I'm the alone lion, right? The lone lion. And then the lion becomes the child when the child forgets about the whole dichotomy of story that the lion was resisting or saying no to, and the camel was just going along with, and it's just free. And now it can just create. And so similarly in a relationship, like before you can move into this interdependence, you have to be really willing to say no to these things that you're requiring of me that aren't true for me. You have to stand up for yourself. And so I think a really powerful capacity for no comes before the step of yes to something greater than both of us. Right. So that's because you had two questions in there, right? So that was like, that's about what does a person do when they're just waking up to this possibility and they're seeing that their partner's having way more demands on them and they don't want to go along with it anymore. Start with being able to say no. But the other part of your question was about what if your partner's not conscious or into personal development or doesn't want to play this game of like a relationship's about evolving into something greater? It doesn't fucking matter. I really don't think that it does because I think the higher always has power over the lower. And if you start fucking leaning into a higher way of being, if you can show up truly surrendering the self to something greater and not surrendering yourself to them, then you are going to be both a yes to something greater at the same time that you're a no to them not being something greater. And that presence fucking elevates. Like when you're around a high vibe person, your vibe comes up. And so this is going back to where we started. I don't believe that you need both people to be in for personal development or growth in order for the relationship to change. I do think you need to be a yes to the relationship. I want to be in the container.
Yeah.
Which means you're present and you're engaged and you're able to respond. It's like they do like clear and they do it like for a while and then eventually they'll give up, but they're not just like, oh, his heart stopped, we're out of here. They give it some time.
Yeah.
And also I think this is an important thing. If people are going to start trying these ideas on that we're sharing, give your partner some fucking slack for you to just come in with a whole radically new way of being, and don't expect years of patterns to just fucking change overnight. You'll have glimpses and there'll be moments, but everything's got a half-life. That pattern's got some longevity to it. Patience is a virtue in this work for sure.
Yeah. And I'm hearing a real commitment to self, and for one to stay in their own lane of being the change that they want to see in the relationship. So not doing this stuff so that you can change the other person, but doing this stuff to elevate your own frequency, your own vibration, to become this enrolling energy in the relationship consistently with a commitment behind it. And then to patiently watch and just notice and observe what happens with your partner. Now, my thought on that is they are either going to, at some point, catch fire with you and rise, or they'll evolve out of the relationship.
Right. So either way, you're better off.
Right.
Yeah. Either way, you're better off.
You're evolving towards love.
Yeah.
You're evolving to a higher frequency, and it's either going to be with them or without them. But that's the commitment you make. Because I think a lot of people, they get stuck in this place where it's like, God, I'm trying to change my partner and I'm stuck and I need to leave the relationship in order to feel free. I need to leave the relationship in order to feel free, to be loving, to be open. Right. And that's why a lot of breakups happen. It's because we need to we turn the relationship into a hostage situation where we're trying to escape the prison to be ourselves. And what you're saying is, you've got the key in your pocket, stay in the relationship, become that person now. Stop waiting.
Be free in the relationship.
Be free in the relationship. Yeah.
If you can't be free in the relationship and you leave, you're fucked.
Yep. Why?
Because you're teaching yourself, I can't be free in a relationship unless the circumstance of the other person is such that I can be free. Good fucking luck in your next one.
Yeah.
What happens most of the time with that is people will stay single because they're looking for the relationship that they can be free in. They don't realize it's their own, they're locking themselves up.
Yeah.
And so it's,
or they pick
if
a
you've
partner
already done that, you can.
I was gonna say, or they pick a partner they're bored with. They pick a partner that is just
free. So there's no risk.
Yeah.
Yep.
That they can
they're
push
still
around.
not free because they're not free to have.
Yes. Right.
Yep. Yeah, man. So, and you did talk about people that are single. I just wanted to mark out for anybody that's single and listening, the pattern I've seen. I'm curious what you think about this too.
Yeah.
Especially for the feminine. I won't say the woman, but the feminine aspect of a person has been single for a while and has hurt in the past. And the trepidation about entering a relationship again is that, I don't want to hurt. I don't want it to hurt. And like what I always say to my clients is like, there's one thing I can guarantee you, if you get in a relationship again, it's going to hurt like a motherfucker. Yeah. And so like, I like to just have people realize that they can either be safe from hurt or they can be free. You got to pick one. And if you want to be free to experience, love has two flavors. It's like pain and pleasure. That's love. Like I have kids, like my fucking heart aches when the smallest insignificant things happen. Does that mean, I'd rather not have kids so I don't have to feel that? No, that is love. So look forward to the burning of your heart in both pleasure and the pain of it. That's the whole fucking point of it. So I just want to mark that out because it breaks my heart when I see people staying single because they don't want to hurt. It's like, fucking hurt, man. That's what makes it beautiful. Yeah. The difference is you want to not suffer that pain.
Okay.
And you don't suffer pain when you have the consciousness that we're talking about that distinguishes the pain from your destiny and understanding how their perspective plays a role in it. You can make sense of that, like pain versus suffering.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've talked about it, but you get what I mean. Yeah.
pain,
So
I
what about you?
imagine,
Have
is
you
something
seen
just to mark
pain?
that
Just
out. Yeah. It's,
yeah. No, pain just is like shit
yeah.
hurts. Like
Right.
bang, I got pain. And the suffering is like, oh, I hurt my ankle, I hurt my wrist. Oh, my wrist is still
Mm-hmm.
hurt. It's like thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I'm sad and now I'm sad that I'm sad. And now I've been sad for 2 days. Now I'm fucking depressed because I've been sad that I'm sad. Whereas if
Mm-hmm.
I'm fucking happy to be sad, like categorically, I'm happy to be sad. I think it's beautiful to feel sad.
Yeah.
If I'm not happy to be sad, I'm going to spin into depression. So that's another version of suffering
Yeah.
versus pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with everything that you're saying, and I'll add something to it as well. Is I think that what I come across with the women that I work with is there's two things. It's when they say I don't want to hurt, they're actually saying I don't want to suffer unnecessarily
Mm,
because
okay.
I don't trust myself. And I
Yeah.
don't trust myself to put myself into a situation in which I won't suffer, because there often is a way in which something has not been processed fully from their last relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
there's still a level of confusion of where either they still feel victimized by something. So they're powerless
Mm-hmm.
to trust themselves to be able to choose differently and to be able to create differently in a relationship. So I think
Nice.
the suffering is a piece there. It's that we can call it hurt, suffering, but yeah, I think it's, from what I see, it's more of I don't trust myself to jump back in this deep water and know how to swim. I very well might drown and lose everything, and I can't
Mm,
afford to do that again. So
right.
how can I, from this point forward, actually figure out how to trust myself? Not only trust myself to find somebody that is healthy or that wants to play a game where we're
Mm-hmm.
elevating in health, but also, can I trust myself to draw boundaries? Can I trust myself to say no in the relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Can I trust myself to leave the relationship? It starts to damage me. Or can I trust
Yep.
myself to speak up and then shift the relationship with agency? Right.
Yeah.
Because I think when someone gets those things where they trust that they can see the person in front of them, at least to the best of their ability, accurately, right? Understand their intentions and see that there's some similarity in terms of where you're headed, trusting that they can draw boundaries and trusting that they can modify or that they have agency in being able to drive the relationship, that you're not just getting into a relationship and hopping in the backseat of the car while it's on cruise control and hoping it stays on the road, but that you can
Mm.
actually be in the driver's seat. I think then what happens is, what's wild is the universe starts to deliver people that
Yeah, of
are
course.
ready to play that game. And the
Yeah.
whole being single thing is, it's, a lot of times it's just that we've got these perceptual filters on us that stop us from seeing the opportunity, because it's just to protect us.
Because of the fear, not connected to our power to
Yeah.
choose, make
Yeah.
right choices. There's a couple of things I want to say about that. The first is, as one of the ways that I help people to connect with the ability to trust that they can choose in a way that they want and that serves them, is to help them to see that everything in the past is not something that happened. It's something they've been creating. So instead of I'm afraid that I don't want to suffer again, when you can see that suffering isn't something that happened, but something you were doing, the pain is something that was happening, but the suffering was something you were doing. When you can start to really realize that, you're like, holy shit, yeah, that hurt. And then I did that with my mind, and that hurt. And then I did that with my mind and my thinking. And wow, I did suffering. I can not do something. I can't not happen something, but I can not do something. And so once a person gets in touch with how much they've been doing something, I find that they connect with their knowing of their ability to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then they can go forward knowing I might hurt. I might pick the wrong guy. That might happen, but I am not going to do suffering.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to do that.
Yep.
I know that I was doing it. I don't need to do that. And I will never do that again.
Yeah.
I might make mistakes, but I will never do suffering.
Yeah.
And those are very distinct, right? Because shit's going to happen. You might pick the right guy on Tuesday and by Friday is the fucking wrong guy because he changed. People change. You could pick the right guy and they can become the wrong guy.
Yep.
That's a thing. And vice versa. I could pick the wrong lady and she could become the right lady. I said that backwards, but that can happen too. You get lucky. So that's the first thing. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that first?
Yeah. I hear you saying that. I'll use different language, that you're helping people really see their participation in the dance that they once were blaming on the other person. That you're helping them see that every step of the way they had a chance. They really did not have a chance. They had a choice about whether they continued that dance or whether they said thank you, no thank you, and walked off the dance floor. Doesn't necessarily mean they're leaving the relationship, but maybe it means they're stopping doing some tendency in the relationship, creating suffering. You restore agency so that what happened to them, the suffering is their creation. And that's a difficult pill to swallow sometimes, because we can get so stuck in the idea that whatever happened was not my fault, or that I'm not to blame for it. Oh, I don't want to take on blame. I don't want to feel bad about myself. But that's not what you're saying here. You're actually saying, like, this is how we restore your power so that moving forward, you can trust to not do the same thing again, because there was something you were responsible for in that was integral to the suffering that you experienced.
Yeah, it is a really subtle thing, and I'm glad you marked that out. Sometimes I forget because I live when it's so present for me all the time, the taking of responsibility for my experience and saying there may be pain, but I'm creating the suffering. It's really easy to weaponize that and to make everything your fault. And that's not really what it's about. It's about realizing the agency and the power that you have, and hold it lightly. And it's, oh yeah, I did that. That was silly. If I know when I was doing it, I wouldn't have done it. And so that's the thing I always remind people. If you're doing something like suffering in response to something that hurt, if you're like, what does that mean? First of all, that means ruminating on thoughts about how it shouldn't be this way. You wish it wasn't this way. You know, how my partner did this, like just the rumination. Right? In the same way that if you have a physical pain and you keep thinking about it, wishing it wasn't there, it fucking hurts more. We can be distracted from it, or we can have positive thoughts and it can hurt less. Same thing with physical pain, emotional pain. If you're ruminating on it and wishing it wasn't, resisting what is the emotional pain, that is suffering. And so if you're doing that, you're making it worse. And if you're doing it and making it worse, you probably don't realize you're doing it. And so the point I was going to make was, if you're doing something and you don't realize you're doing it, then you are innocent. It's not your fault. We're all just fucking doing the best we can with the little bit of awareness that we have of all the things that are going on. That's why when somebody gets into a car accident, they don't call it a car purpose. Most car accidents are accidents because you didn't mean to do it. You didn't. If you had known, you wouldn't have done it. Like, very rarely is somebody intentionally smashing a car into somebody. When you do, it's probably got a different legal name. I don't even know what it's called, but it's probably, don't call it an accident. And I'm not a religious,
possibly. Yeah.
If you kill somebody, I don't know if you smash into a tree or something.
Reckless driving, maybe.
I was saying, I'm not a religious man, but I love this Bible verse. I don't remember verbatim, but when there's like, Jesus is getting crucified and he says to this other dude that's getting crucified about the people that are doing the sword jamming in, he says, forgive them for they know not what they do. And I forgive myself for I knew not what I was doing. That's my practice. Like that, I have to remember my innocence in the act of doing suffering, doing whatever the thing is that's not helpful, in order for me to not beat myself up for that and stay connected with my agency to do something different. If I can't look at it as some suffering that I'm doing, then I don't have my agency to do something different. But if I look at it and I get swept away, but like, oh my God, why was I doing suffering then? Then I'm like not forgiving myself. Because I'm not seeing my innocence. So I'm glad you brought that up, because without understanding the innocence and the willingness to forgive yourself, which I believe is coming from the awareness that you didn't know that you were doing it, without that, like these ideas we're talking about are dangerous. Yeah. They can really spin somebody out.
They can. And you can also end up falling into the thought that, oh, I've got this part of me that's sabotaging myself. I had a part of me that was sabotaging myself in a relationship. So now I'm dealing with this aspect
of
me.
These demons.
That's trying to take me down. That's trying to stop me. That's going to come out in my next relationship.
So my partner's a problem and I am. Oh boy, there's two of us that are fucked up.
And I can only deal with one. So I'm going to say.
Yeah, exactly. I call that the weaponization of self-awareness. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, but we're not up for that game. So you got to be careful not to do that. Yeah. Dude, I'm just realizing you and I said that we were going to talk max 30, 45 minutes. We're at an hour and I feel like we could keep going for another hour, but we probably should
wrap it.
Save it for another conversation.
Yeah.
But on that note, actually, if anybody watching, we're going to post this on both our YouTube channels.
Yep.
If anybody watching this has any questions for either of us, post it wherever you are watching this. If you'd like more of these conversations, drop a comment, let us know. I'm happy to do it again. Happy to keep going.
Yeah. And also if anybody wants to challenge us on some of these perspectives and say, hey, that's,
Come on.
that's BS, or I don't know
No,
how
no.
that would apply to this situation.
I love it.
Put it out there, because it can be fodder for the next video that we create together. And, these are just, we're offering. Yeah.
We're offering. And the reason I do love challenges, being facetious there, but sometimes people challenge me and they're right. And I have to fucking swallow that. And then I have to see but there's also something true in what I'm feeling and seeing. So what's something transcendent where we can meet? And so I do invite challenge. And thank you for saying that as well.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So listen, man, awesome chatting with you. Time flew. I think we covered some really important topics, and I look forward to the next one and talking with you off camera. And
love it, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, everybody else. And again, like, comment, subscribe to each other's channels. And
subscribe to Clayton Olson and come over to my channel, subscribe too.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.